Earth Day is this coming Thursday, I think. Nobody raised my awareness about Earth Day any more than Frank Armstrong. I will always be grateful for his friendship, for his wisdom. He was a sage among us. He really was. And anything I do or say today, I'll give a lot of credit to Frank because he did increase my awareness so much of what's going on with the earth. I wanted to tell you a story to start with this morning. When I was pastor at First Baptist, and all those years when I was pastor of a congregation, I think I was very naive to how controversial just everyday subjects could become. And I remember years ago at First Baptist, I thought, we should really, I'm a lectionary, I was always a lectionary preacher. I preached from a lectionary reading for that day. But one year I decided we really need to emphasize Earth Day. And that was because of a lot of conversations I'd had with Frank Armstrong. So I invited Barbara Brown Taylor to come and preach for us that day. And I said, Barbara, please specifically address that topic. And so she did. I cannot tell you the controversy that caused. I was shocked. There were two families that left our church because we devoted a service to Earth Day. And they said things to me like, there's nothing about Earth Day in the Bible. Well, I couldn't imagine anybody saying such a thing. It's throughout the Bible. If you look at the beginning of the scriptures, Genesis 1 and 2, I ask you to read it for today. I hope you've had time to, and if you haven't, I hope you will. I noticed something right away when I reread it, something that I hadn't thought about in a while. There are two creation accounts. One is in Genesis 1, the other one is in Genesis 2. They're separate accounts that were combined together by an editor. We don't know who the editor was. We know that Genesis was written in the period of the exile, which was after 521 BC. So we know that we know that there were many accounts about the faith of the people of Israel. And so these editors or redactors just put some of these together. And interestingly, they didn't care whether they agreed with each other, contradicted each other. It didn't matter to them. They put the stories of their faith in there together. So these two stories are quite different, the creation account 1 and creation account 2. But here's what I wanted to point out. There's something very similar in both of them, and I wanted you to hear them. In the first account of creation in Genesis 1, everything is chaos, dark, water everywhere. And then the creation begins. On day 1, interestingly enough, light is created. Let there be light. And so on the first day, we have the evening and the morning, the first day. On the second day, a dome comes into being that separates the waters. In other words, the firmament, or what we would call the sky. That's day 2. Interesting now, this tells you this cannot be any kind of scientific explanation for creation, because you have day and night before you even have the sky. On day 3, we have the dry land. Earth appears. In Hebrew, Adamah. Remember that now, Adamah, because later Adam will be made from Adamah. Adam will come from Adamah. So you have on day 3, the dry land, the earth, the seas. Along with it, you also have on the same day, the third day of creation, vegetation, plants, trees, and fruit. And by the way, at each step along the way, the Creator says, this is good, this is good, this is good. On the fourth day, finally the sun comes along. We have the sun, the moon, and the stars on the fourth day, and it is good. On the fifth day, swarms of living creatures. I guess that included mosquitoes for some odd reason. But you have swarms of living creatures, birds, fish, all of these things on the fifth day, and it is good. On the sixth day, you're thinking, humanity. Man is created, the woman is created, right? Well, yeah, but guess what else is created on the sixth day? Cattle, cows, wild animals, along with Adam. What does that tell you? It tells you that the biblical writers, the people of ancient faith, didn't see a whole lot of distinction between these living creatures, these wild animals, the cows that roam the pastures, and humanity itself. There's a kinship between us all. And by the way, it is on that day, the sixth day, that God doesn't say it is good. In the Hebrew, it's like God is jumping up and down and saying, yippee. He says, it is very good. God is so excited over the creation, according to this ancient account, that God can't even contain the divine self. It's a wonderful story of the creation. The second account of creation, we have a garden in the east, a garden called Eden. We have rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates among them, which we still know today in the land of Iraq. We have abundance everywhere. We have the woman, because it is not good for the man to be alone. So woman is given into the formula of creation. And then we have the naming of all the creatures. And then God says to the human, to the Adam made from the Adama, from the earth man made from the earth, God says, and this is literally what it says in the Hebrew, you are to serve and to keep it. You're to serve the creation and keep it. In the King James, it says, and God told man to tend the earth and to sustain it. It literally says that we are here to serve the creation and to keep it. So the takeaway from all of that for me is our primary task as human beings is to take care of the home God has given us. Take care of the planet that we call home. Take care of the environment we live in. It's the only home we have. We might be able to escape to another one day, but who would want to? Who'd want to go to a place like Mars when we have Costa Rica, and when we have the Grand Canyon, and when we have Lake Lanier and Northeast Georgia? Who would want to leave this place? Not me. So we are to take care of it. Unfortunately, in chapter 3 of Genesis, we have humanity getting into all sorts of trouble. The chaos that God had beat back begins to seep back in. We have what we call the fall of humanity. And then from there, everything unravels. We start killing each other. We start degrading the earth. We get selfish. We get jealous, and on and on. All the things that we have today, now we see where they all began. Now remember, this is written in the exile. This is written by people who had been dragged literally away from their homeland. And they were in a new culture, separated and cut off from everything. And what were they celebrating? They were celebrating their home. They were celebrating the creation. They were celebrating the place they had come from. It is in our nature to celebrate it. But it's also in our nature, unfortunately, to be selfish and to do whatever we want to do with it. And so we end up destroying it. Have you ever heard of the country that ate itself? The country that ate itself. It's called Nauru. It is a sovereign nation, not many people, a very tiny island in the Pacific. And unfortunately, they realized about 100 years ago that they had something that the world was in great need of, phosphate. And by the way, guess how the phosphate was created? When these birds fly from Australia to Hawaii or wherever they fly, they need a place to rest for a while. So they stop on the island of Nauru and they poop all over it. And it is the droppings all over those rocks, all over that soil, that created the phosphate that became so necessary to the Industrial Revolution, so necessary to our way of planting crops and having a greater yield with fertilizers. Phosphate from it destroyed itself. So I've asked Ron to show you a video of the country that ate itself. It's just a few minutes, but I hope you'll pay close attention and you'll be amazed and horrified. So Ron, thanks a lot.
Wait a minute, I froze up for a minute.
Okay, can all of you hear me? Now that's a real eye opener, isn't it? Here's one nation that destroyed itself by not taking care of its resources at all, but just getting everything they could out of it as quickly as they could. And now they're paying an enormous price. You saw the obesity rate, the number of people who smoke. You saw the diabetes rate. It's just unbelievable. Last year, this little Pacific island had 200 visitors, 200, which is almost nothing, because there's nothing to do once you get there except see the sad devastation of that island. So I wanted you to see it because it's a good example of what happens when we just exploit the earth and we don't take care of it. So I wanted to read a text for you this morning. This is from Psalm 19. And I'm going to read it from Eugene Peterson's translation. So you remember it well in your own version, King James or whatever you grew up with. But I want you to hear it in this very colloquialized language. God's glory is on tour in the skies. Godcraft on exhibit across the horizon. Madam Day holds classes every morning. Professor Knight lectures each evening. Their words aren't heard, their voices aren't recorded, but their silence fills the earth. Unspoken truth is spoken everywhere. God makes a huge dome for the sun, a superdome. The morning sun's a new husband, leaping from his honeymoon bed. The day-breaking sun, an athlete, racing to the tape. That's how God's word vaults across the skies, from sunrise to sunset. Melting ice, scorching deserts, warming hearts to faith. The revelation of God is whole and pulls our lives together. The signposts of God are clear and point out the right road. The life maps of God are right, showing the way to joy. The directions of God are plain and easy on the eyes. God's reputation is 24-karat gold with a lifetime guarantee. The decisions of God are accurate down to the nth degree. It's a psalm of praise. It's a psalm that just revels in the creation itself. One of the things you learn if you study theology is that there are several forms of revelation. And the very first is called natural revelation. In other words, something of the grandeur of God is revealed in the creation itself, in nature itself. And who cannot look at the sky at night without an overwhelming sense of awe? Or who cannot look out your window right now at what a month ago was bare and is now green and beautiful? And if you're on the lake with the sun shimmering across it like diamonds all over it, beautiful in every way. So this is our home, and it's our responsibility to serve it, to take care of it. Apparently, we haven't been doing a very good job. We know that there's always been change in climate. There have been times of warming of the earth and times of cooling of the earth. But there has never been a time like now. Never has the pace of change been what it is today. We're changing at a rate so rapid that it is causing devastation that we may not even think about unless we're paying attention to the news. Rising sea levels, huge chunks of ice. Look at what is happening, as Carol pointed out a while ago, in the very simple things. The pollen season is greatly extended now. It's about a month longer than it used to be. And that's because the climate is becoming so much warmer and things are blossoming and blooming so much earlier. And even if you want to look at it anecdotally, don't you remember when you were a child? Some of you are not old enough, but do you remember when you were a child, how bitter cold it would be in the wintertime? And sometimes last for weeks at a time? When's the last time we've had that? In the last 12 years, 10 of those years have been the hottest on record. Every year, it seems to get another few fractions of a degree warmer. And we know from science that we can only take so much of that before it begins to have repercussions that we cannot undo. We're almost there. So what do we do about it? Now, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a scientist. I just know there is a moral imperative that we do something and that we take care of it. And how do we do that and sustain ourselves economically? There again, that's for scientists and politicians and others to answer. And maybe we'll have some of you weigh in on it before we finish today. But what are some things that we can do to take care of the earth? Have you ever seen the Green Bible? I love this. This is my favorite Bible in my house. It is the New Revised Standard Version, but there are many articles in the front of it. One of them by Barbara Brown Taylor, one by Bishop Desmond Tutu, one by Pope John Paul II, some by leading scientists of the world, but they're absolutely wonderful insights about what we must do and how we must act quickly. One of them is by Calvin DeWitt, and it's called Reading the Bible Through a Green Lens. And if you do that, if you actually begin to think of the presence of the vegetation, the trees, all the things about the earth, like we just read this morning, is from start to finish. It's fascinating, really. The Bible begins by talking about a great tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A metaphor, of course, but interesting that it is a tree that serves as the metaphor for good and evil. And then when you get to the very last book of the Bible, in the last chapter of Revelation, and it talks about the tree of life that is in the middle of the garden, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And all the way through the Bible, nature's mentioned on just about every other page. There's something about this home of ours that just speaks of the Creator. There's something about the world we live in that compels us to want to treat it right, but also, sadly, to want to take so much advantage of it that we exploit it. Have you been to the Muir Woods just north of San Francisco? If you haven't, I hope you'll go one day. One of the most beautiful places on earth. When I was there a few years ago, I had to buy this poster, and it's entitled Advice from a Tree. Listen to this. Very short. It's a poem, and it doesn't rhyme, so I hope you'll like it anyway. Advice from a tree. Stand tall and proud. Sink your roots into the earth. Be content with your natural beauty. Go out on a limb. Drink plenty of water. Remember your roots and enjoy the view. Isn't that beautiful? And I love the last one especially. I always want to be able to enjoy the view. I want to look out on the beauty of it all and continue to see it. I want my grandchildren to see it. I want the generations coming after me to have it and know it and appreciate it as well. Now, next week, I want to talk about more specifically, what can we do to take care of the earth? To the best that I know anything about that, I want to share some of that with you. I also want some of you to come prepared next week, if you don't mind. Some of you have more of a scientific mind and background. Some of you have had a lot longer interest in how we can take care of the earth than others of us, perhaps. So I'd love to hear from some of you about how we can take care of the earth next week. But today, since Earth Day is this coming week, or it is in this week, I want us simply to celebrate the earth itself. So I want to open it up for some conversation now. I want you to talk a little. So I guess we can all unmute ourselves perhaps so that we can join in. But I want you to share some things about the earth that speak to you most powerfully. Things about the earth that you can simply say in celebration about it and of it. So can I hear from some of you? Can we hear together from some of you of your own love for the earth and all of what we have?
Yeah, I want to share a poem that is my favorite poem not poem, but quote by Mark Twain. It's the last page of my book. And it says, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people sorely need it on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. And I think that is so true. Going around this beautiful world of ours and experiencing all type of peoples and things, I just think broadens your perspective so much. And that is why Carol and I love to travel so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see the grandeur of it when you see more of it. You know, my motto's always been, I'm so afraid I'm going to die and have missed something. I want to take everything in I possibly can. I want to see all of it that I can.
Well, one of Carol's favorite things is when somebody asks us, where's the favorite place you've ever been? And Carol says, I probably haven't been there yet.
Or it's the one I just got back from. Yeah. What else would you say in praise of the earth?
I love the bird song.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
Yes.
No more beautiful music on earth.
I would say, Bill, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, John, thank you.
For me, it's probably the comfort of the natural world, the comfort that it brings. And as with Ron, I would like to share this poem that speaks much more eloquently than I can speak. And it's a poem by Wendell Berry.
Oh.
The Peace of Wild Things.
Yes.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives might be, I go lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief.
Mm.
I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. And for a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free.
Oh, beautiful.
So
And
it brings me comfort,
yeah.
mainly.
Planting trees for us.
Who else?
You don't have to say.
We can't take care of the earth if we don't value it, if we don't celebrate it.
Bill,
Yes.
buddy, I worked with John down in the garden as I worked with you there,
Uh-huh.
and the planting is what we do that probably helps the earth the most, because destruction of this great blanket over the earth, the vegetation and the creatures, us being included, that have some influence on them, the more kind we are to them, the kinder the world will be to us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something we have to keep very much in mind. If you don't go out and work the soil some and help it to produce, you're not doing your part.
Yeah.
At least one part. We've got more parts than just that to do.
Absolutely.
Bill,
Yeah.
this is Evie. Many years ago, people wanted to know what they could do for our son, whom we lost 29 years ago. And we said, plant a tree.
Mm.
And a lot of people planted Yoshina cherry trees. And every time I see one of those trees, it brings back a lot of memories. And we have one in our backyard now. And it just reminds me of a lot of different things. And I see them in front of the hospital and in different people's yards. So I guess in a way, planting a tree was a way that we helped the world.
Absolutely. By the way, listen to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. You know, when one of those families got so angry because I dared to talk about, I dared to interpret our dominion over the earth as our responsibility to take care of it, rather than just use it however we pleased. You know, for a while, I thought of them as my enemy. They left the church, and I was rather glad, to be honest with you. I didn't have to put up with that kind of mean spirit anymore. But every time I read this verse about how God sends his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and the rain falls on the just and the unjust, you know, the teaching there is that the love of God that is revealed to us in the creation itself, is there for everybody to enjoy. And it's an example and a demand upon us to love even those that we don't agree with. So I know that there are climate change deniers. I know that there are people who say, well, it's all a hoax. I mean, I don't understand that, but I refuse to think of these people as my enemies. And I don't know the best answer for what we do, for how we correct things, for how we pull ourselves from the brink of such destruction. I don't want our world to become a Nauru or anything close to that. And I don't know the answers how to protect it, but I do know that we have to come up with them. And so, you know, I'm much more interested these days in alternative forms of energy. I know that we can't just pull away from the way we get our energy overnight. We'd all die if we did that. But we can begin to look at better ways. And we know that solar is renewable. We know that wind is renewable. There are all kinds of renewable sources of energy out there. And I think we need to really explore more of it and adapt to more of it and adopt more of it. But we also, each of us individually, I think, have a responsibility to take care of it in our own personal way. Years ago, I did something that I have regretted for the rest of my life. I was in my first little church. It was out in the country. I was a seminary student. And it was one of these little churches where if you were the preacher, you did it all. You led the singing. You ran the bulletins off on Sunday. And by the way, by running them off, I mean I had to use an old mimeograph machine. Do any of you remember those? Oh, I hated it. I hated it. And I was standing there trying to get these programs out for Sunday morning, and I'd inevitably mess them up. And then I'd have to start over. And then, oh my goodness, one day a woman came into the church and she said, "Preacher, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm running it off the bulletins for Sunday." And she said, "You mean we're still using a mimeograph machine?" I said, "Well, they say that's all we can afford." So the next week, she buys and has delivered to the church a copying machine. I was so happy. I was so happy. You know what I did? The next day, I had an old truck that my dad had given me, an old Chevrolet, a 78 Chevrolet. I love that truck. I wish I had it today. I backed it up to the church office. I got a friend to help me lift that heavy mimeograph machine. I put it in the back of the truck and I took off with it. And I did what had been done in my granddaddy's day and in my daddy's day. I just went to a place out in the woods and pulled it out of the back of the truck and threw it out there. And then I went home that night and started preparing the sermon for Sunday. And it happened to be the sermon from Genesis chapter 1. That I have put you in the earth, put you on the earth to tend it and take care of it. And I couldn't sleep that night. It bothered me so badly that I had done that. It bothered me that I would even think of doing that. But what I was doing was just what the generations before me had done, what I'd seen done, what people did. But that verse just jumped out at me. I would say the Spirit of God really spoke to me that night. And I hate it when the Spirit of God keeps you awake all night. But that's what happened to me that night. So the next morning, I got back in that truck, went and got another friend, and drove out and found where I had thrown that mimeograph machine out, put it back on the truck, and then hauled it this time to a place where they were just beginning at that day and time in that part of South Carolina to do some recycling. And I let them take care of it, recycle it, turn it into something that can be reused. But that was a wake up for me about taking care of the earth. I really hadn't thought that much about it. until then. And that was in my early 20s. But from then on, I've had this increasing desire to just clean up anything that I see that mars the beauty of our creation. Hunter and I get on our golf cart, which is electric powered, and we ride all around our neighborhood on Riverwood and Tapawingo, and we collect all the trash that's thrown out every week. Hunter looks on one side of the road and I look on the other. And every time we spot one, we'll stop. One of us will jump out and put it in a big bag. And honestly, just on Riverwood and Tapawingo, I get over a half a trash bag full every week. I can't believe it. The stuff is just thrown out. And there's one I'm going to need some help with if any of you want to volunteer. I just saw it a few weeks ago. I was out for a walk and I looked down the embankment. Somebody had thrown out a microwave. And on Tapawingo, a flat screen TV. People are just dumping them wherever they want to. And unfortunately, they're able to go home and apparently sleep at night. And that bothers me that they can. So we'll talk more about that kind of thing next week. How do we, in a responsible way, begin to take care of our home, this planet that God has given us? There are all kinds of things that we can do, and there's a lot to read and talk about. And we're going to be wide open to ideas from you about the Earth's sustainability, that we do things that are sustainable. So we need to be working toward that end and getting ready for our conversation next week. We're going to end today with another video. Ron, you have one for us that Ron just told me about it. And I asked him to please share it with us this morning. So Ron, will you introduce it and share it for us, please?
Okay, I just found this and I thought it really tied in well with our program today. And I think it's Paul McCartney, but I'll play it for you now.
This is an open letter from you and me together. Tomorrow's in our hands now.
Find the words that matter, say them out loud, and make it better somehow.
Looking down from up on the moon is a tiny blue marble. Who'd have thought the ground we stand on
Could be so fragile.
This is a love song to the earth. You know what an every world, a diamond in the universe. Heaven's poetry to us. Keep it inside the earth. Keep it inside the earth. Keep it inside the earth. 'Cause it's our world. It's not about possessions, money or religion. How many years it might live.
When the only real question that matters is still a matter of perspective. Looking down from up on the moon, you're a tiny blue marble.
Who'd have thought the ground we stand on
Could be so fragile. This is a love song to the earth. You're no ordinary world.
diamond in the universe. Heaven's poetry to us. Keep it inside. Keep it inside. Keep it inside. Keep it inside.
Keep my heart safe.
'Cause it's our world.
Bang, 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 bang. Check my heart is in a crazy mess. It's time for us to do our best. rest unless you wanna be motherless. Green heart is the way of death. Speediness and too much greediness. 6 billion people all want plentiness. Some people think this is harmless, but if we continue, they'll only live emptiness.
This is a love song to the earth. You're no ordinary world. The timing in the universe. Heaven's poetry to us. Keep it safe. Keep it
Special paradise.
It's our world. It's our world. 'Cause it's our world.
Please keep it safe.
It's our world. It's our world. 'Cause it's our world.
Oh, Ron, that was wonderful. I love that. Thank you. By the way, we lost a real champion in our community this week, Ruby Bronner. A lot of you knew her. I went over to see her one day. I'd often go by to visit. She lives over on Black Drive. And one day I pulled in. It was a hot summer day. She was out there mowing her lawn, way up in her 80s, hot as blazes, out mowing her lawn. So she turned the mower off and she saw me pull up. She came over. I walked in the backyard with her. And I said, Ruby, I had no idea that you cut your grass. I said, don't you do it anymore. I said, I'll come cut it for you every 2 weeks. I said, you got a small yard. It won't take me long. She said, Dr. Cove. She said, what are you talking about? She said, when I'm out here in my garden, when I'm out here on my grass, when I'm out here around my flowers and listening to my bees and my birds, she said, God's right here with me. She said, God's closer to me here than God is at Antioch Baptist Church. She said, now you wouldn't take that away from me, would you? That's why I loved her so much. We're going to miss Ruby Bronner, the greatest ambassador for goodwill in Gainesville, Georgia, probably. But boy, we gave her a send-off the other day in her funeral. Well, we thank God for all the people who see and are willing to do what's necessary to take care of our home and to love it and celebrate it.